How are you, sir?
We're all going to have a little greeting first. We haven't met. Nice to see you, Mohammed. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
So welcome, everybody. So we're going to try and drive this conversation as far as possible to some active recommendations at the end. But I'm going to start at a slightly higher level. We are living in a world that is unrecognizable from 20 years ago. Multilateral institutions are giving way to bilateral deal-making, as we saw with President Trump's very energetic trip to the Gulf recently. Trade's being used to engineer political and economic aims. Governments and companies are deploying vast amounts of capital into AI, and technology is transforming businesses around the world, and economic power is shifting fast. So I'm going to start, Matteo, with you, just to give a quick overview. In this very new world, who are the winners and losers here, and where does Europe fit in? How has it affected Europe?
Good question. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I think the change caused by President Trump is an historical, radical change. And there are different types of choices of President Trump. I prefer President Trump when he signed agreement in Saudi, and I confirmed the very important result of the historical trip in Saudi, to the President Trump when he signed executive order about tariffs. Because I think create a trade war against Europe, who is the best ally of the United States of America, is not, in my humble opinion, the best way to manage this global order, or as we said in some edition of FII, of global disorder. So I think we have a multilateral world. We have to understand if the future will be really a competition between USA and China about artificial intelligence. That is the current opinion. I think the situation is more complicated. We have an incredible change in demography, and Europe have to wake up. Because Europe is a great continent, is the most important historical success, because we transform a place of war in a place of peace. And we are so happy if Albania finally will be part of Europe as we expected. But Europe risks to become too much focused on bureaucracy, and for that reason we have to surpass the logic of over-regulation. We have to invest in innovation. We have to become a lab and not a museum. Just to finish, please look a symbol. When Europe decided to do the Green Deal, that is not artificial intelligence, that is human stupidity. Green Deal is the terrible thing for Europe, because the goal to arrive to fight against climate change is a good goal, is correct. But if we arrive with the distraction of German and Italian manufacturing, that is not strategical. That is the best auto goal. We cannot speak about football because, yes, here, Noel, we discussed about Champions League and Newcastle and Aston Villa, so please don't open this door. But it's a mistake. So my answer is Europe continue to be a very important player in the global world, but Europe have a problem, first of all, with herself. We have to wake up and come back to think about the future and not only about the past.
So I'm going to go to Mohammed in 1 minute, but I just want to follow up on that with Bernie. Just to quickly, you made this point about, people focus on the battle between China and the United States, but there's obviously a lot more happening in the world. Bernie, can you just quickly talk from a capital flows perspective? How relatively attractive is Europe nowadays? Obviously, there's huge amounts of capital being deployed in the US. We'll talk about the Middle East in a second. And then obviously China, in a more closed way, is putting a lot. I mean, is Europe a place? Recent survey from Ernst & Young showed, I think, the lowest inward investment for 9 years the other day. I mean, what is actually happening when global investors think about Europe?
Thanks, Roland, and great to be here in Albania.
You make a good point. I think that if you looked at Q3 last year or through most of last year, Europe was, I would say, third or fourth quartile in terms of the level of interest for investment. So as I traveled around the world, people were very interested in the US, what was happening there, in India, perhaps Mexico. And that picture has changed a little bit. So the US was coming on the back of the Inflation Reduction Act. There were a lot of hairs and whistles around that, but that was where the focus was. I'd say in the last 2-3 months, people are asking the question again, given the change in the US posture, should we be looking at Europe? Should we be looking at the UK? What does that mean? Now, I think that Europe does need to step up to make that a reality for investors that are looking in Europe. And I think it's important that Europe does that because we are all looking for global balanced flows. We're all looking for opportunities globally. And it would be great if Europe presented itself as a more viable investment destination. So I think in short, the capital flows at the moment are, I'd say perhaps a little bit in flux. By that, what I mean is everybody recognizes that the US has real challenges in terms of the twin deficits of the budget deficit and the trade deficit. And any US government responsibly should look at that. We saw the rating agency change of the US yesterday. Now, how the US goes about it, whether it's through tariffs or other means, is one thing. However, within that, I think Europe has a really important part to play. Germany at debt to GDP of 60-70%, it should probably be higher. There should be more consumption in Europe. There should be more, better regulation to drive greater investment opportunities here. And then the final thing I'll say is Europe is an incredibly wealthy region. Europe has a huge amount of excess savings, and it exports these savings largely to the US. And so essentially, it's not able to consume its excess savings efficiently. And so it's not like other regions that are having to import capital, actually. So there's an opportunity for Europe, but I don't see them grasping it fully yet.
So that's a really important point. And as Bernie mentioned, the US credit rating got downgraded by Moody's yesterday for the first time. Other rating agencies have done that before, but there's clearly a huge debt challenge. They talked about the federal deficit going from 6.4% up to 9% by 2035. So there's a challenge there, and there is capital here. The question is, how do you deploy it? So in the Middle East, President Trump went and a wave of deals were announced and capital being deployed at speed. What can Europe learn from what's happening in the Middle East as a place where these decisions are made rapidly and capital is deployed at scale in such a way? Are there any lessons we can learn from that?
Well, first of all, I have to comment about Europe because I operate in about 7 European countries. And I'll just tell you how Europe operates badly, but I have hope because I believe in human beings. I believe that people want to do better for their children. Otherwise, all the Europeans, they need to go get visas to go work somewhere else if they continue doing this. So, for example, I was invited to Berlin by this amazing mayor where they have shortage of housing, about 500,000 units. It will go up to 700,000 units. And I'm lucky enough, I do large, massive real estate project. Very boring. 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom. That's what I do. And when I visited him, we went and visited the old Berlin airport, which is massive, And he said, I said, okay, we'll build the largest park in Europe. Green parties and all that nonsense. And he said, yes, but if we do the planning, and if it passes, the right of the lizard and the snakes and the studies will take about 10 years. And if we pass, I said, well, it's not a problem. Then lizards live, snakes live, and let the Germans sleep on the street. I mean, this is crazy, huh? So what I'm telling you, this is really, if you want to summarize what's going on in Europe, weak leadership, strange rules, regulations, and it's really very dangerous what's happening to Europe. But we also have to have hope that changes happen. Good leaders will come. People care about their countries. It's a human nature. And good leadership in Europe and all these countries is going to happen. And I believe that that will change. Because, look at the shift in U.S. between what we were like 4 months ago and where we are today. So I think there are, the people of Europe, they love Europe. They will make a change. It could take some time because, Europe is Europe. It's not a joke. And we want Europe to progress. We want Europe to do well. We want America to do well. We want Russia to do well. We want China to do well. We want Africa to do well because the world is very small and we need to all prosper. I don't want only my children to do well. I want your children to do well, because this world is very small. And if I come to the Middle East, I might not answer you directly, but I'll answer you this way. I think I really worry about you in Europe. I don't know what democracy you guys have, but NGOs have more rights than the parliaments. Isn't this interesting? And I always ask, I say, first of all, these NGOs, who elected them? Do you guys know who elected them? Do you know who funded them? I wonder about that. Maybe I'm a stupid man from the Arab world, but I say, parliament, voting, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so NGO, who vote for the NGO? Who brought them? Who gives them money? But anyway, so we had a discussion. So they said, Mohammed, you have no democracy. They have no right. I said, I fully agree. I fully agree. But if I talk about my country, #1 airline in the world, #1 healthcare in the world, #1 education in the world, #1 tourism destination in the world, security, safety, transparency. But I agree with you. America has 2 political parties. We have a problem. We have 1 political party. That's the only difference. In America, they are very busy with election, and Europe, and we are very busy with construction. Simple. Why?
And in Italy, we have 56 political parties.
And why I say that? Because at the end of the day, you will never, ever have a great Riyadh Airlines, #1. You will never run FII with transparency. You will never take care of your people. You will never have good security, good education, good healthcare, unless you have true, proper, great system in the country. Without it, with corruption, with games, you will never achieve these things. So I think, but I want to make one more comment also, but I think the change that's happening in the world, I think Donald Trump is giving the people a wake-up call that everybody have to wake up. The world is changing all the time. And I think it's good for us in the Middle East. It's good for everybody in the world as well. I'm sorry if I answered indirectly.
It's a very rich answer, so thank you for that.
But I really would like to know the NGOs, who's elected NGOs in your democratic system in Europe? So somebody should explain to me, really. I'm confused.
We can discuss that backstage afterwards, but I think I think you make a really valid point around speed of decision making. The world is moving very, very quickly, and President Trump has come in and started to govern more by executive order and make decisions fast. Obviously, other countries are able to do that and move at speed and deploy capital and make decisions. Europe has a lot of positive attributes that it's trying to push onto the world, for sure, through regulation and environmental rules and other things, but it is creating the problem that you talk about. And we'll talk a little bit, Matteo, in a second about the structure of fractured parties within countries, and then Brussels on top of that, and all the different levels you have to get through to make change. But we'll come to that. Henri, I'd like to go to you. How do you react to that as a multinational based in Europe?
Well, thank you. Pleasure to be with you this morning. And indeed, it's quite refreshing to hear from you. I'm in the infrastructure business, and obviously I'm in the long-term business. So all what you are saying is music to my ears. We need stability for the long-term business, for infrastructure business. We need stability to attract capital. And it was very interesting about what you said when the European capital is actually going to the Americas, and also because of banking regulation, so we can discuss this matter as well. So we need long-term visibility for the capital. We need long-term regulations. We cannot have retrospective regulation. I was very interested about what you said, Your Excellency, in the rule of law. So we need constant rule of law. But I see a little bit of tension in what we are seeing around the table between appealing for rule of law and stability, and at the same time recognizing that things are changing very fast, and to some extent also applauding leaders which are taking fast decisions. And we need to find the right balance between taking fast decisions and having stability, because we don't want, you said, changes in the US regulation, for example, and then 4 years later, having a complete change because you have a complete change of ruler. So that's the balance that we need, and we do business across the globe, and really what we like in this business is to be able to develop projects, and for that we need not 1, 2 years, we need 10 years, 15 years visibility, and the things that we are going to produce are going to last during 40 years, 50 years. So what about cybersecurity during this 40, 50 years time? So there is an immense need for a stability in the regulation, whatever they are. I mean, even if they are protecting snakes and lizards and whatever, as long as they decide which snakes they are going to protect for the next 40 years. And that's what we need to have.
So that's a really interesting point. How would you weigh up the US versus Europe on that measure of long-term visibility and stability? I mean, you mentioned that obviously we could have a totally different government in the US in 3.5 years' time. So how do you look at those two decisions?
Well, I will enlarge your question. I mean, there are a number of emerging markets, fast-growing economies, which are extremely well managed on a planification standpoint. And if you take Saudi Arabia, a lot of countries are working on a very long term, which is what's missing a little bit in Europe, where it's more scattered and more short-term oriented. I will not make a huge difference between the US and Europe in that perspective. I think Europe, of course, is sort of suffering for being scattered. And we have, as railway, we have a mission. It's to connect Europe, so physically, not only capital-wise, but also physically. And that creates some tension within the infrastructure. But both, I would say, both the US and Europe lack visibility in the very long-term planning and the long-term investment in this stuff. So, of course, you have mentioned Infrastructure Act, and in Germany, we are launching a lot of investment in infrastructure.
You would feel that that stability exists in somewhere like the Middle East, that long-term?
Yeah, long-term visibility. I see more long-term visibility and long-term planning in a lot of emerging countries rather than what we see in Europe. Whereas Europe and the US is facing a very pivotal moment in time because all our infrastructure are 50, 60 years old. So they need to be replaced. We are coming into a huge replacement cycle in addition to the energy transition that we are talking about. So it really requires...
So you've got to get the rules right now to get the capital. Samir, can you just give me you've done a lot of real estate in Europe and elsewhere. Can you, to the point that Mohammed made about the different timescales and the different rules to get things done, can you talk a little bit about your experiences?
Yes, thank you. So I'm getting only one product and one example that we do in 3 parts of the world: Western Balkan, Europe, and United States. We call it affordable housing. That is a process that we do everywhere, besides many other businesses that we do in Europe and Albania. They take us 3 months to get a building permission in New York for affordable housing. They take us almost 2 years to get the same permission in Europe, and close to 3, 4, 5 months in Albania. So that is the big difference that we see, and it's the same product for the same target of people. So that is the problem that we see in Europe, and I don't know how it's going to continue, which kind of policies that need to be changed, but it's something that need to be done faster because the product is like this. It's affordable housing for different parts of the world.
So how do you see, doing business in Albania, how do you see the world that is changing in the way that we've described? What are the opportunities here?
Well, Albania is growing up. The business is doing very well. There are a lot of opportunities in tourism, banking, green energy, and many other opportunities. So Albania is growing very fast. Our main focus now is in tourism. So not only Albania, but in all Western Balkan countries. We see tourism as a good opportunity to invest, and yes, we continue to invest on tourism industry. So
great. Ada, I'd like to go to you and bring in technology as a key area that has driven the United States for the last 20 years. Huge amounts of capital deployed, huge amounts of big companies that have emerged. I think that Mario Draghi said in his report last year that there were no companies of more than 100 billion euros that have been created in the last 50 years in Europe, but the top 7 trillion euro companies in America have all been created in the last 50 years. So there's this big disconnect in what's happened with innovation and scaling innovation. Can you talk a little bit from your perspective of why it works so well in the US and what we can learn?
Well, I think a big reason for that is investing in R&D at the higher education level. So it's no surprise that many of these companies cluster around higher education institutions. And the funding, not only does it come from government funding, but from the private sector. So I think about 4% of the GDP goes to R&D. Things are changing these days, as everybody knows here. There's been more regulation, which is not a good thing. And one of the worries is that it drives talent out of universities in the US, and it's an opportunity for other places actually to harvest that talent. So that's a big driver. I mean, in the state of California, which is, I believe, now the 4th largest economy in the world, is really the economic engine of California is the system of the University of California that generates these patents for many of these technologies. I just want to elaborate more on a point that my colleague Mohammed made, which is on democracy. In science, we have this saying that science is not a consensus. Galileo was right, and all of his other scientists at that time were wrong, and they committed him to death because he said the earth is round and not flat. And Martin Luther King said, you can't lead through consensus. So in a way, I think there's a delicate balance between democracy and taking a popularity contest and then making a difficult decision that not so many people can see is the right decision. So that's very important, and that's something that maybe everyone just assumes democracy is better. It's not necessarily. It doesn't serve us in science.
Well, if you have a big budget, you can win the election. You know what I mean?
I'm not sure.
I think if you have 16 billion in the US, you can win the election.
Yeah. But anyway, to your point that not everyone, you can't take everyone's opinion and just make a popular decision. And so in terms of, the fragmented landscape that we live in now with the different kinds of regulations around artificial intelligence, it's really, and the protectionism, if you will, of data really is hindering the progress of artificial intelligence. It's really more nearshoring, what's happening right now. And we need to have a more cohesive, concerted effort to allow data flow throughout different regions. Right now, where the demand is high and the resources are available, definitely in the Middle East for artificial intelligence and progress in that. It's a big leader because of the demand and the resources available, including energy resources. And technology is definitely moving towards AI, including in medicine. It's maybe something that's a little understated in our investment community is how useful AI is in coming up with new treatments. It used to take 20 years to figure out the structure of a protein so that you can create a drug for it, and now it takes 1 year because of AI. So it's definitely not hyped enough, I think, in the area of healthcare.
So I'm going to come to Matteo in 1 second, but just on that AI point, how important is it for an area like Europe to actually lead in AI, or can it just take what the US is developing and deploy it? So how important is it to actually own the infrastructure and develop the technology yourself in this situation?
Currently, it's very fragmented, and there's a protectionism between countries. And I'm not a politician, so I don't know how much of this is good or bad, but in order to accelerate progress, there should be more trust and collaboration, both financially and intellectually.
Mohammed, you want to come in?
Yeah, myself and His Excellency Yasser Ramayan, we started a company, we founded together called Moon, which is really the competition for Amazon in the Middle East. And You know, we're smoking them out, and I love it. You see, I think the world and mainly,
How are you doing that?
It's an e-commerce, but it's very advanced e-commerce system for the Middle East.
Okay.
One of the most dangerous products we have, it's called Minutes, where we deliver everything in, Your Excellency, 11 minutes or 10 minutes. Thank you so much for your support. So, you know, I really believe that most of the world, and mainly Europe, are occupied. You know, say country occupy a country. I think Europe and the rest of the world is occupied by Google, Meta, Microsoft. They control you. They control us. Seriously. Like, you can't do business in Europe if you don't live and breathe Microsoft, Google, okay, X as well with it, and Meta and all the other technologies.
But isn't that going to get even more extreme with AI?
My answer to that is that I believe Europe, I hope, you know, young people will come and do something, but immediate solution, do not ignore China. Let them bring in technology as well. Let all these two countries, two technologies, three countries compete. Don't be a slave to one party. And you know, all this nonsense of data and security, come on. Who has the data of Google? Come on, hey, we know, right? So it's okay, the Chinese can have some, American can have some, and let's share it in the middle. But you have nothing in Europe. So it worries me. The Middle East worries me. We're under control of two, and that's why I disagree with Donald Trump when he said, oh, we need to export more. No, you're already exporting. What's the total sale of Microsoft annually? 2.2 trillion? Or market value? I mean, massive export of Google and Microsoft. Who will make old-fashioned factories? By the way, just to let you know that I just bought a building, 15-story, from China. It's being packed. It will be delivered in Abu Dhabi, and it will be installed in 6 months. So even buildings are now robotically built. It's, by the way, built by robots. So there's no, it's old-fashioned factories and people going to factories. I think it's just nonsense, you know. So I worry that the question you put is very serious. Said, you and I are really controlled. And I give you one example. While I'm preparing for you, I thought I'll go back and pull some of my old speeches, because there's one item I love to speak about, which is the rich people are getting richer and the poor people are getting poorer everywhere in the world. And it worries me. Really, it worries me. You know, I couldn't find my speeches on Google. I don't think they want anyone to talk about poor people are getting poorer. It could create a revolution. I couldn't find it. Google, YouTube, select, it's not there. Somebody controlling somebody.
Matteo, I'd like you to respond to the technology question.
I don't respond about democracy.
No.
I'm in favor of democracy.
Of course.
Okay, order. 1 second.
I respond about that, the role of Europe. I'm very excited.
I want you to know, but I'd like to respond on 2 levels. And we won't go into, you know, different, whether we should be democratic or not. But number 1 is this technology gap in Europe and your perspective on that. And then secondly, the speed of decision-making in Europe and the fact that the democratic system is so fragmented in terms of making decisions that it takes a long time. So can you just address those 2 things? Because I think they are related as well.
I think the most important thing for Europe today is invest in a word very simple and very old. This word is education. Why? I think about my city. I come from Florence. Florence became rich thanks to the finance. Florentine people, they used to say, we invent the banks. I'm not sure they invent the banks, but bank means banco, come from expression, Italian expression is banco, bank. Banco means table, because the Florentine people in the past used a table and exchange money, gold, etc. Okay, banco. I think Florentine invent bankrupt, because when the people failed, please, what happened? They break the table. Banco, bank table, break, rotto, bankrupt came from that. Bancarotta is an expression come from Italy. So we export a lot of things, also bankrupt. But what transformed Florence in the city everyone wants to see? Finance? No, yes. Because financial people, rich people of the past, decided to invest in small places called La Bottega, who became a place of innovation where poor people were educated exactly as the son of the rich people. That created the Renaissance. Renaissance was an unbelievable movement in Florence, caused by the capacity of rich people to guarantee an high education also to the son, to the new generation of the poor families. Why I used to say about my city, Florence? Because we cannot discuss about make decision speed in Europe. It's too complicated. And then, Mohammed, I will say a story Xi Jinping told me last meeting I have with him in 2016 about the concept of democracy. Please, we cannot open this door now in public. I think we can discuss about how we can transform Europe, and I finish about that. Yes, today we have Google, Amazon, great entrepreneurs who became strongest in the world, starting from zero. Because 30 years ago, when I studied without Google, without web. And when I used to say that to my children, they look at me, really? You study without mobile? Yes, I studied without mobile or without website. What happened? A new generation invent the future. I think there is only one possibility for Europe to come back. It's not a change democracy. That is impossible. That is very complicated. The only thing is transform Europe from a place of bureaucracy, as today we are too much, in a place of innovation. I don't know what type of investment will be winners in 2016, 2017. I don't know, because the world will be different from today. But I think if Europe will be able to become a lab for the new generations, and that means less bureaucracy, that means less capacity to invest in the human talents, that we will see what type of artificial intelligence, what type of investment in security. Only one thing, the most interesting opportunity for you, the terrible problem is demography. Because when a civilization have a collapse in terms of demography, that is a problem. And we have a great problem of demography. But if you think about the most important possibility for Europe is invest in the life science, invest in the education, invest in the human talent. I'm optimistic about Europe despite European political decision-making.
So, I'm going to push just a little bit harder on. I'm not expecting you to reinvent democracy. That's not my question. But if over-regulation and the stifling of human talent and the opportunity to build and take risk and be dynamic, which exists more in America and other places than in Europe, if you need to peel back some of this regulation, does Brussels have the capability to undo regulation as well as add regulation? That is, in your view, you're an experienced person.
We have a duty. This is not a possibility. Or Europe will decide to change deeply the modality of over-regulation, or Europe is died. Okay, Europe, 30 seconds. Europe started with 6 countries. The idea was veto 6 countries, only 6 countries, Italy, France, Germany, and Benelux. Everyone could block the order. Now we are 27, and I hope Albania and the order will enter. We cannot continue with a veto, because everyone could stop the orders. That is not an organization. That became a United Nations General Assembly. So we need a change of modality of decision, and we need a change because in Europe, there is, yesterday we discussed about that, America invent, China copy, sorry for our Chinese friends, Europe regulates. That is the traditional word. I think it's not true. We have to become the place in which that is legal. Not yet. We will become a lab to invent other things. For that, I don't think we have to bring a bomb on the bureaucracy in Brussels. I cannot say. I think, but I cannot say. I think we have to change very deeply the modality of transformation in European Union, and I think, paradoxically, Trump could help that, because it's unbelievable. That is the best and the last hope of Europe.
So we have 8 minutes left. As I said to all of you, what I want to do, and I think Matteo's already done this, is just go around the table very quickly and say what are the 1 or 2 priorities that you think are most important to rejuvenate and revitalize Europe and create the energy and the dynamism and the opportunity that Matteo is referring to. So can we just quickly go down, and then if we have time for a couple of questions at the end, we'll go to them. So Mohammed, what would your 2 priorities be?
Europe?
Yeah.
Well, the guy who runs Google is Indian, the guy who runs Microsoft is Indian, the guy who runs X is from South Africa, and 60% of all Americans, PhD holders, are non-Americans. So I think Europe should be very smart how to integrate brilliant people from all over the world to Europe. So, get some brilliant people to mix with the brilliant people of Europe and learn from the US experience. I think it's...
So it comes back to Matteo's point about talent. You have to build your local talent, but also bring in international talent.
The system and the talent that they get. And I think, through that, plus you have to have a good political system that process. And I really think that US one country and Europe so many countries. And people say that people in Brussels, each country send their worst people to Brussels. I think they should fix that. I hear, I'm not European, but I hear.
Ada, what would your 2 recommendations be?
I agree with my colleague, Matteo. It's through education, but making higher education accessible. So if I look at the US, for example, you have the Harvards and the Stanfords, but Harvard and Stanford will graduate 5,000 students per year. But if you look at the University of California, each one of those, there's 10 of them, will graduate 15,000. So it's higher education for the masses, not for a sliver of society. Like if I think of London, England, who gets to go to Cambridge or Oxford?
Right.
But if you look at California, UCLA, UC Berkeley, UC San Diego, UC Irvine, they are at that level, but they're graduating the masses. So it's the #1 upwards mobility vehicle for California.
And is that using technology or is that physical? I mean, how do you scale that?
It's heavily investing in high quality higher education.
Okay, on all levels. Okay, that's really interesting. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I forgot one thing. And the guy who created Apple is from Syria. I forgot that one. By the way.
Yeah.
Samir.
Half Syrian.
I want to see Europe a little bit to promote more themselves. We see every day today, invest in Singapore, invest in Dubai, invest in US. Europe have for sure a lot of value and a lot of opportunity to invest. But all of them say that invest in France, invest in Germany. So we don't see a unified Europe on that sense. And I'm sure that our opportunity every day is all the world investing in Europe. So this kind of promotion needs to be done on the proper way, as now we don't see it. And the second one is through visibility, as well as the same taxing system and unique tax. We see it in different countries, different way of taxing, and it's very difficult to calculate on that way. So I cannot say very difficult, but it's not easy to calculate. So that are the 2 major things that I see what Europe can do better.
Great point. Bernie, what would your recommendations be?
Well, Europe is trying hard, and when I was thinking through my first answer, I thought I should give Europe credit for, particularly in Germany, they have passed, gone beyond the constitutional limit on the budget. That's a good thing. Perhaps with America's pushing, the defense budget is going to go up as well. So there's many things that Europe is looking to do. And the first part of my answer would be to implement all the things they've said, the Draghi report, which His Excellency talked about. It's all there. And as a finance person, capital markets union, these are technical things, savings and investment union, would really free up the huge amount of savings in Europe to make things happen. So there's a blueprint for what Europe to do. They know, a famous politician said, we know what to do, we just don't know how to get elected once we've done it. So that's for the political classes. The other thing I would say, which is such a cultural thing, and how do you make it happen, and I don't have an answer to this, it's a little bit frustrating, is to develop the risk culture. They've got excellent students, excellent education, they've got the capital, it's an incredibly wealthy region. But what you see in the US, you see a little bit in the UK, less here, are the individuals who will back that entrepreneur, happy to take a loss. Absolutely. It's okay if they lose their business, they come back. It's okay if they go to PIF or whatever, they make an investment. In the US, you lost it all, you come back, you get another piece of investment. So that piece of risk culture where we're not afraid of failure is something, but I've thought about that a lot. I don't know how you change mindsets or cultures around that, but that's the missing ingredient to everything else that Europe has.
And is that also not just the willingness to take risk, but the ambition to really be a world-leading company, for example? A lot of UK companies where you're based will build a really interesting business and then they'll sell it to America when it's still relatively small and it'll scale over there. I mean, presumably the risk and the ambition come hand in hand. Is that willingness to really try and go large, effectively?
Yes, I mean, the US has got developed capital markets, so if you take your business there, it's worth 2 or 3 times. They might look at the number of trillion-dollar companies versus the ones here, so there is that. But a lot of incredibly talented Europeans are in the US, in the education system, driving businesses. If you look at the leadership of Silicon Valley, there's a lot of South Asians, a lot of global people that are there. So I see daily, there is a bit of a VC culture. There are investors like PIF and others here. But there's this valley, when you have that idea, you get $100,000 from friends and family. You have an idea, you need to raise that 3 to 5 million. You get that, you're struggling through, then you need to get to that 50. At some point, the VC will turn up. At some point, banks like Bank of America will turn up without $3 trillion on balance sheet, whatever it is. But you see a lot of that talent trying to do that elsewhere. And if Europe could capture some of that, it'll drive growth.
Last word to Henri.
No, thank you. I will use a very corporate slogan, which is back to basics. The only thing I will ask to Europe is just to focus on the basics. Forget about the non-essential pieces. I mean, you were discussing, when you think about it, in Europe, we have no banking union. We have no European defense. And we are dealing with extremely tough regulation, strict regulation on very small things. So we should start to focus on the 2 or 3 main elements which are going to unify Europe and which are not yet there, because we are talking about digital companies, but we don't have global digital platforms in Europe. We don't have global regulation which allow to have digital platform. We are talking about education. It is very scattered education so far in Europe. So just pick and choose. Infrastructure is one of the vital elements, of course. Technology, education, just focus on that. Defense, of course, and forget about the rest. So just go back to basics.
Brilliant. We have time. There was a desire to have questions. We have time for one question, I think, to stay on the clock. Does anybody have a question? We have some microphones, if they do. Can we get one question for this esteemed panel on stage?
Adjo.
What? Question in the middle. Sorry, he's going to have to pass the microphone up to him. There you go.
Thank you so much, esteemed panelists. And I'm Anas Agag. I'm between Saudi Arabia and UAE, and moved from Europe for pretty much these reasons. I had my company in Estonia before. And I work in the AI infrastructure and building data centers and so. And my question is how Europe is going to tackle the energy issue in the next few years if you want to lead an AI.
Who would like to take that? Very, very important question.
Could you repeat the question?
How is Europe going to tackle the energy issues, particularly if it wants to lead in AI?
It's a really,
Mohammed, and then, so Bernie and Mohammed.
Well, first of all, I think you should look at the data that how much China way ahead of everybody when it comes to building energy infrastructure. Both, by the way, yeah? traditional and sustainable solutions. So why? And the reason is that they have a stable one party that's planned 10 years ahead instead of one party going green, next party going back to traditional, while we're losing all that advantage. But I really think that we should all believe, and I hope they're indication that technology is evolving, and you might actually do a lot of stuff with this energy. That's really the talk on the street. But I think a lot of great organization, including the chairman of Aramco mentioned that there's a lot of investment into power infrastructure that's going on.
Bernie, do you want to?
It's a real challenge. The cost of energy per kilowatt hour is very, very high in Europe at the moment, right? They had a model of cheap energy from Russia. So forgetting about all the tariff debates we're having, Europe already had a massive strategic issue coming out of the Ukraine crisis. Now, some of that has been, Germany accelerated LNG, et cetera, and that will continue. And I assume, I'm not an energy expert, that there'll be a lot of energy imports from, His Excellency mentioned, from Saudi Arabia, from Qatar, and from the US. I think, I may have this wrong, Europe...
But I don't think that will give them the efficiency to compete.
Yes, and
because,
so
the cost of energy is high.
You're right. So I think that the other point I was going to make is I think Europe put online about 60 gigawatts of renewable energy last year versus about 30 gigawatts in the US, and the year before about the same. And so that will go into the mix, but it has to be in the mix. Europe is investing quite aggressively in its grid, and I think that's really, really important. Actually, we don't talk about that too much, because actually a fast and efficient grid. But there are other things Europe could do, right? Spain has a massive infrastructure for LNG that could be plugged into the rest of Europe to balance things out. But it is a big strategic issue because Europe makes things. So for each unit of output, the energy input is much higher than the UK or the US, which is more services.
Okay, we're out of time. Matteo, if you've got 30 seconds.
40, just to say, Italy, I lost my consensus starting from energy because I tried to drill more and bring oil and gas from the Italian Sea, and my decline started exactly with this decision because all the people in 2016 told me it's a mistake. But, so there is not political question more political than energy. Energy is the most important. Europe have a lot of problems. The first is exactly what they say. When Germany decide to close the nuclear because they have a good relation with Russia and don't invest in innovation, Germany start with the decline of economy, exactly for this political decision. So I believe we haven't the time to discuss, but you have a very good question, because the point, very clear problem of Europe is not democracy, is not time, is not the young talents, is how we can manage the problem of energy in a system in which Middle East and South in particular are so strong. America, with shale gas, changed very deeply inside, because with shale gas, they change a lot. Russia is Russia, and will remain Russia in the next centuries with this type of country. The problem for Europe is exactly that, the lack of energetic strategy.
Great.
Not very good final, sorry.
No, you did great. Thank you for the question, excellent question, and thank you so much to our panelists.